kick off really our customer discussions, with a company that, really started out with us on a very grand vision about 3.5 years ago. And we collectively stumbled a little bit, and then we picked it up, and, the rest, Mark will actually tell the story. About 3.5 years ago, I was there along with a couple of my colleagues at the Emirates headquarters in Dubai, and it actually looks like United Nations, by the way, with the diversity of the employee base, etc. And when we started talking about risk, it was mostly centered around safety. And after a few conversations at that time, the person who was actually leading the risk and safety program, had this grand vision. He actually told me that, I want this 100-inch screen in my room that actually gives me a view of every possible risk that is out there, in our ecosystem. So whether it is, the risk of flights taking off on time or any incidents, physical incidents, cybersecurity attacks, across the world, all the stuff that we serve, we want that really, right? It started out with that grand vision, but over time, there was a little bit of stumble because it was very grand and we're moving fast. And then about 18 months later, the gentleman was transferred, and he moved out of his position to Australia. And Shankar Bhaskaran, who's in the audience, our GM for International, he called me one day and said that, I spoke to Guy Murray, who was helping with the project at that time. Guy is also part of dnata. And he said that, we've got a really, new guy who's strict. He's very stern, very strict, and he's basically questioning whether we need to run the program or not. Okay, and that's where, the re-journey started, if you will. And just a quick intro on dnata, they really, a lot of us have obviously heard about Emirates. Emirates, everybody knows the brand. I mean, there are more probably T-shirts written Emirates than probably any other brand in the world, possibly, particularly because of the football, the America Cup, and so forth. But dnata, if you don't know dnata, dnata watches you every day when you travel. So they are, a pretty significant size company. They are owned by they're part of the Emirates group, but they manage 130 airports across the world. They do various things for 130 airports, from cargo handling, ground baggage, catering, etc. They actually are catering services to 196 plus airlines in the world. Okay, and I guess that's one of the reasons why they keep it low-key, because you don't want to be seen as competition, to Emirates all the time, especially the other airlines. But I wanted to introduce, Mark, and bring him on stage to just share, what really happened after that, and the whole theme of the repurposing, if you will, of the project and the thinking. The vision is still grand, but it was centered on simplicity, organizational alignment within Emirates and dnata, and also really around personal leadership on how to get these things aligned together, and a very specific outcome-based purpose in their GRC vision. So Mark, please welcome. Welcome to you on the stage. And just as a background, Mark, please take a seat. As a background, Mark is responsible for the global safety culture at dnata, Emirates, globally, and also the company's One Safety program. Prior to joining dnata, Mark held senior leadership roles in the energy sector, most recently with Veresen, and before that with Nexen and Shell in Canada. And he was accountable for many safety programs and risk programs across sites in North America, North Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and Europe, as well as in startup, operational, and growth businesses. With over 25 years of experience, he has led successful programs in multinational, regional, and startup organizations. So Mark, welcome. A big hand for him as being the first customer on the stage. So Mark, maybe, I've given a short intro, but maybe it will be great if you can give us a little bit about your background and how the transition really happened from a very cash-rich, energy world to a more tightly run airline world.
Absolutely. So I'm Canadian, and I grew up in northern British Columbia, about 14 hours north of Vancouver. I started my career as a forest ranger, so obviously responsible for risk management issues around protecting the forest, the lumber trade, and obviously communities that were potentially impacted by forest fires. In the wintertime, my job involved oil and gas development areas and trying to make sure that we could reduce the environmental impact as much as we could and comply with the regulations. I went on to get involved in project management of development of major construction projects around the world with a focus basically. I was never a good startup guy, but I was a good turnaround guy. Projects that were off track and needed some focus for on time, on budget, and delivering the results predictably. I had tremendous success with that. And in the late 1990s, as a result of fatality that I was involved in, I was asked by a company to develop a safety management system for them. The company that I was working for encouraged me to go to companies like Shell, Exxon, BP, see what the best that the world had to offer, and I went out, developed a management system that would predictably give us the outcomes that we wanted, put the leadership and ownership on the leadership, and make sure we could deliver results. As a result of that, I got offered a job at Shell, rolled at Shell, and I thought initially that they wanted me to come on as project manager, and the reality was they wanted me to come as a safety manager. My first response was not very pleasant. I thought, what a lowly job this is. I'm a project manager. Surely I can do much better than that, but I would use it as an opportunity to get in. I went on and spent 12 years with Shell on significant projects around the world, multi-billion-dollar projects that needed some support to deliver the outcomes that had an impact on people. I went to regions that were experiencing fatalities once a week. I went to regions where gas plants were blowing up. Oil rigs were catching on fire. Literally trying to deliver performance results successfully and predictably in every situation that I could. I left Shell and went back to Canada, worked for a couple of major companies there, again putting systems and processes in place that would support risk and loss control, and was approached by Emirates Group to come on board with them.
No, thanks, Mark. So one thing we're very curious, there are a lot of people in the audience from banks, insurance companies, pharma, energy, and other industries as well, from consulting. And the word operational risk comes up pretty often, more often in banks. When I look at a business like yours, most of the operational risk, or a large part of the operational risk, is about lives. I know that dnata, is, whether it's on the tarmac, a truck runs over, or there's risk of, food bioterrorism, for example, with 120 million meals being served by you guys every year, or it is the airports in Karachi where incidents happened, or Iraq where things happened. What is your definition of operational risk, and how do you view operational risk? And
well, I was very excited to join dnata and Emirates Group, and then looked at the complexities of the organization as a whole from a risk perspective and a compliance and regulatory aspect. From the regulatory side, it's a very diverse industry. Obviously, you got the country regulations. It's a self-regulated industry, so you have IATA and ICAO, basically the airport associations. Many of the airlines are state-owned, so they have their own regulatory requirements, and of course the contractual obligations that we have to our airlines. And managing risk and loss control is fundamental to everything that we do. We move thousands of airplanes every day and tens of thousands of passengers every day safely. We produce hundreds of thousands of meals, and people is the number one issue that we focus on as a priority in our business. Most of you have flown in to here on airplanes. to get and keep that airplane in the air. We have two very distinct sides of our business. One is above the wing, which is basically the airplane, making sure that the airplane is serviceable, pilots and crew are trained, and all the operational performance is there, keep the plane flying. And then we have the ground operations that has direct impact on not just the people that are working there, but potential impact on you as individuals. And a simple thing like a strike of an aircraft, a little dent in an airplane, you may experience delays from that, but the process safety around making sure that the integrity of that aircraft is good, so that we know that when it takes off that it's going to come down safely, is a tremendous amount of process. So when I joined dnata, I went through a risk management review. I went through a summary of what we currently had been doing. And one of the fundamentals of our risk management process is making sure that we can support a continuous improvement program. And to do that, obviously incident management is very front and center. The ability to manage incidents means that you have to have a good reporting culture, which we have a very good reporting culture. We need to make sure that we're capturing the data and that we can investigate to find out what happened. And of course, we need to make sure that we put actions in place that can prevent it, not just in a singular location, but we can spread it around the world. And this was how I met MetricStream. So I had arrived into dnata and had only been there for a couple months and was trying to get some reports out of our incident management system that MetricStream had helped put in place for us. Basically, we used their software as a platform. I tried to get information out of it, and to be honest, it just wouldn't work. I couldn't find any of the data that I really wanted to. I couldn't trend it. I couldn't summarize it in a manner of what I wanted. And I was extremely frustrated. It was my first time in the aviation industry, and my first response was, oh my God, if this is as good as we've got, then we're probably in trouble. So I went back and looked at the contracts. Sure enough, MetricStream was delivering on the contracts as it was laid out. I went and looked at the tendering process to determine how we ended up with MetricStream, because I had come to the conclusion either the software was a problem or we were a problem. I couldn't find anything, honestly, that was an indication that MetricStream wasn't delivering or didn't have the capability to deliver. And I dug into a little bit as to why the system wasn't functioning that would add value from a continuous improvement aspect. The reality was that we had formed some teams that were tasked to identify software that would allow us to include incident management or incidents that we could somewhere use down the line. This particular team was made up of subject matter experts that tended to be very silo-focused. They had individual objectives versus a corporate objective. They had, I would say, spent quite a bit of time worrying about the pathway that they were going on instead of what the vision is of where they needed to be. And I was somewhat disheartened that we as an organization really didn't put the effort in to find out where and what our incidents were and what we were going to do to get better. And the basis of that was going to be a robust incident management program based on a real good software solution. So I came up with a plan. I went up to my boss, the president, and basically told him that the many millions of dollars that he has spent and the thousands of man-hours that he has spent is really not delivering, and I'm the new guy and I have a better solution. And I laid out for him what I wanted to do in a timeline that basically was unheard of. And one of the things that he asked me about was collaboration. Obviously, there's multiple groups that are involved in this, from operational folks to our IT people to various other groups, whether it be HR, and I'd explain to them what I was going to do and why I needed to have absolute control to deliver the results that we wanted. So I called in the teams, and with the help of Guy Murray, who is here, we basically went through the process and what we wanted. And one of the very common answers that I had for many of the self-interest groups was no. We're not doing that. We're not reinventing the wheel. We had customized the software as provided by MetricStream to a point that it was adding such limited value that multiple parts of our organization was using spreadsheets on the side to try to collect the data. So I went to California on the 12th of December last year and met with Gaurav and Shelley and laid out what I wanted to do with basically a sprint team over 6 weeks, that we would roll out a out-of-the-box solution with less than 5% customization that would support our vision of having a tool that would support continuous improvement and instead of a tool that was just a repository. As you can imagine, we also had Christmas in the middle of that 6-week period. I went back to Dubai and explained to my peers and colleagues that this is what we were going to do, and we were not going to touch or tweak. We were basically going to use an out-of-the-box solution, minimum customization, and we would build on it through our vision and on a roadmap that was predictable and spelled out over the next 3 years. The great answer, and probably the most success on the whole project, was nobody thought it could be done. So everybody stayed away and basically left Guy with a small team of 5 people. MetricStream put together a small team as well. And both teams together had a sole purpose to have a solution within 6 weeks. On the 31st of January, we rolled out we introduced our new platform, and I'm happy to tell you it was the success of the collaboration of the 2 teams, the commitment and dedication of MetricStream to make sure that it happened, and the leadership of Guy Murray on our side, that we just were not going to compromise on trying to satisfy every single party that may be out there. At the end of the day, we happy to say our compliance to incident reporting and tracking in the new software is now at 96%. Previously, in the first edition, it was 4%. Our action tracking today is at 89%, and previously it was, I think, 17%. We've simplified the software, we've simplified the process, we've held the accountable managers, or the managers accountable for delivering, and we put in process to support the outcomes that we wanted.
Thanks, Mark. Like I said right in the beginning, I think it's really a story about, leadership, and also organizational alignment fairly quickly. One question or 2 simple questions as you've gone through this journey. There's always a balance between simplicity and adoption. I mean, the fact that this has been rolled out to 36,000 people across the world in that span of time, and there's always a set of things that come back saying that we had this wish list, has not been accommodated, etc. So how did you keep that balance between simplicity and adoption to such a wide range of people? That's one question. And the other thing is the internal, typically when such a large program is being deployed, cutting across silos, there is, whether you call it political or you call it change management issues that come. So maybe in the next couple of minutes that we have, those 2 would be useful, because that's a challenge I see a lot of people in this room actually facing when I meet with customers and talk to them.
So probably the most fundamental element was dnata's growth. Dnata has grown about 2.5 times its size in the last 3 years. And we have purchased multiple countries around the world, and fundamentally we had been operating as a holding company. So we had decided from a risk perspective that our risk to reputation was such that we couldn't allow all of the individual businesses to go on their own way, and that we needed to really centralize with a common set of systems and processes. So I wrote the integrated management system to the company, or for the company, and incorporated the simplicity of incident management from a continuous improvement aspect and what it means for dnata as a whole, and literally stripped out all the complexities that individual silos and self-interest groups had within the company. And I went around the world to each of our operating stations, introduced integrated management system and 5 key priorities, which included incident management, and literally put it into the most simple, basic terms and spelled out what the vision was in the next 3 years and the steps that we were going to take to go from 80% into the 95% efficiency range for the software and the program as a whole. It was more the vision and the idea of where we wanted to get to in the next 3 years that really bought people into the process. It had nothing to do with how great anything was that I had developed or where we were going. It literally was a step-by-step approach that was simple and transparent. Everybody could buy onto it, and it just alleviated all the uh-oh moments that you typically get when things are coming at you.
I think we've run out of time, but we'll just open it up for a couple of quick questions before we take a break. Any questions?
Edward Martin from IKEA. You mentioned how to create a reporting culture. Can you give us any tips on that, please?
Well, I would say the number one thing that we did was certainly try to drive the importance of safety, and that we cared about people as a whole. We also reinforced it with a just culture. There's been lots of swings in the safety movement over the years, where we talk about no blame cultures, we talk about fair cultures. Having a just culture where people understand that the consequences, and that could be consequences to you, the passengers, could be consequences to our customers, and the importance of making sure that we have the transparency and that we reward reporting.
One more question.
Yes, you mentioned that you changed the compliance or the GRC system that you have from being a respiratory or a data management process into a continuous improvement process. What are the main features that you embedded in the new customization that enabled you to actually change it from being, storage into a continuous improvement process?
Well, through the integrated management system that I wrote, it has the basic fundamentals of plan, do, check, act, as do any management systems. We looked at software solutions and what does artificial intelligence mean to our business as we start collecting more data, not just on passenger needs, but also on our customer needs and where they all fit and how we can predict what those are going to be. Then we looked at what do we align from a continuous cycle in the risk identification process, establishing where our compliance and gaps are, and what we do to support a continuous improvement through our governance model.
Thank you, Mark, and for people in the audience, Mark is here for the rest of the day till late evening today. So if there are any questions offline that you want to talk to him about, please feel free. I'm volunteering this for you.
Great.
But thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jan.